Recording in progress.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, August 23rd. We'd like to call today's county board meeting to order. For the record, there's a copy of the Open Meetings Act here on the north wall of the legislative chambers, and proximally in the back on the west wall is an automatic defibrillator for health reasons. We'd like to ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start today, I wanted to say quick on behalf of the board that we'd like to send our condolences and regards out to the family of our chair. She was encouraged not to come today, even though she wanted to, so we hope that her and her family recovering well and things will be all right till she gets back next week. With that, we will go into roll call for the Board of Equalization.
Commissioner Boyle. Yes. Commissioner Borgeson is absent due to family passing of a family member. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Here. Commissioner Friend. Here. Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Morgan. Mr. Chair.
Here, item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. Item B is a call for a meeting that's set Tuesday, August 30th as the date for a hearing on certified assessments and corrections. What's the will of the board? Motion by Boyle, second by Friend. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 3 is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on Board of Equalization related matters not officially listed on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments? Seeing none. We have items D, E, F, G, H, and I for approval. Is there a motion to approve those items? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Hearing no questions, that motion includes adjournment also. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll now call to order the August Board of Corrections meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson is absent. Commissioner Boyle. Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Here. Commissioner Friend. Here. Commissioner Garcia. Here. Commissioner Morgan. Here. Mr. Chair.
Here. Item 1, is approval of the minutes of the Board of Corrections meeting held on Tuesday, July 19th. What's the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 2 is citizens' comments for the Board of Corrections. Are there any Board of Corrections related items that citizens would like to discuss, that a citizen would like to discuss that aren't officially listed on the Board of Corrections agenda? Are there any citizens' comments? Seeing none, we'll go to item 3 and the report from the director. Director Meyer.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Myers, Director of Corrections for Douglas County. After the first month of the fiscal year, jumping into enclosure number 1, Administrative Services. After the first month of the fiscal year, we are $63,140 under budget. $406,208 were spent on overtime costs during July, and that is a decrease of approximately $40,000 from the previous month. Enclosure number 2, Community Corrections and Reentry Services. The Sanction Center and Transitional Discharge Center placed a total of 20 individuals in community corrections and saved 105 bed days in the jail. The 24/7 sobriety program admitted 89 individuals. There were 3,439 breath tests. 12 were positive for alcohol use, and 13 individuals no-showed. The overall compliance rate for breath testing was 99.9%. There were 51 individuals monitored for 1,287 total days of SCRAM monitoring, and there were 0 no-shows, 0 tampering violations, and 1 alcohol violation. And the SCRAM compliance rate was also 99.9%. There were 1,043 drug tests administered with 115 violations and 61 no-shows, and 24 drug testing patches were submitted for testing with 2 violations. And I wanted to mention, as I've said kind of throughout the year during my my reports to you each month, our population has trended down a little bit, and it's always difficult to quantify particularly why. But I think the 24/7 program's growth has had an impact. There are, as of this morning, 465 people on that program. It keeps just steadily, slowly growing month after month. And I believe that that means that that is one tangible thing I can point to as a reason for population reduction, that some folks who would have been detained pre-trial are being monitored on that program. Coincidentally, well, not coincidentally, but the revenues projected, as this is a participant-funded program, if it stays around these numbers, will bring $660,000 in revenue to Douglas County through the operations of this program. Work release admitted 13 individuals, and house arrest admitted 56. The Reentry Assistance Program, or RAP, admitted 16 individuals and 2 achieved a GED. 119 individuals were served by Reentry Services and Therapeutic Communities, and 1 of them achieved a GED. Pretrial Services referred 21 individuals for priority prosecution, saving 112 bed days. 247 individuals were placed on pretrial release. Overall, 1,096 individuals were managed on pretrial release with an 85% compliance rate. 97 individuals visited the law library. And our enhanced pretrial release program is now scheduled to launch on September 12th. There have been some delays that were a bit out of our control related to getting our staff access to the national criminal justice databases. We have now developed an alternative process to use existing resources, which will suffice until our new staff are able to access those databases. Enclosure number 3, compliance. Our regular documentation is being collected for all of our compliance practices. Our Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA, audit was completed in July. The auditor did not report any significant findings, though we are awaiting the final written report. And our annual security audit, which is conducted in partnership with the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services, is scheduled for September. Personnel, enclosure number 4, 12 officers below the rank of sergeant, which included 1 retirement, left employment in July. And we'd like to offer congratulations to Officer Pamela Johnson on her retirement after 18 years of service to Douglas County. 8 new officers have now graduated from our academy on August 12th, and we began another, and this time an accelerated academy, which had 9 officers began their employment with us yesterday. And kind of leading into my next bullet point, we made an agreement with FOP Lodge 8 to utilize 10-hour training days to shorten future academies by 1 week. This will provide quicker relief to our existing staff by getting those officers trained a little more quickly and filling shifts. We had numerous staff who were recognized for second quarter meritorious service awards, and those are included in enclosure number 4. And importantly, more than 25 staff volunteered to be trained as peer support specialists on all shifts. I will actually probably next month bring at least 1 or 2 of them to the board meeting as they have now completed their training. I think this is a tremendous show of unity and dedication to the well-being of their coworkers. And this is one of several initiatives we have in the works to support our staff, to build their resiliency, and hopefully improve retention. Enclosure number 5, population. There are 1,377 admissions. That was an increase. Our releases were 1,285. We had a high count of 1,131 and a low count of 1,001. And our average daily population was 1,073, and that was an increase of 56, but despite that increase, we are still trending lower than we did a year ago. There were 90 custodial bed sanction days, which was a decrease. The U.S. Marshal population remained stable. The felony pretrial population increased, as did the misdemeanor pretrial population. Probation violations increased slightly. 20% of our population were between the ages of 18 and 24. 65% of our population were minorities. 15% of our population were female. And 16% of our population were homeless or nearly homeless. Enclosure number 6, medical. There were 1,174 intake screenings, and there were 341 physical and health assessments. Inmates were sent out 23 times for emergent medical care. 7 of those involved 911. There were 10 hospital admissions, which resulted in 35 combined days of hospitalization. And there were 40 off-site specialty medical appointments. Enclosure number 7, mental health. There were 147 initial psychiatric appointments, 17 initial mental health assessments, 114 mental health infirmary placements. There were 148 individuals placed on drug and alcohol withdrawal protocols. There were 6 referrals to the Board of Mental Health, and 5 individuals were transferred to long-term psychiatric facilities. Other noteworthy items: we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. We had 8 known cases of COVID-19 among the incarcerated population during the month of July, which resulted in the quarantine of several housing units. I believe this next bullet is wrong. I think the number is actually higher than 5, but it was between 5 and 10 staff members tested positive throughout the month. Our staff vaccination rate remains at approximately 75%. During July, we administered 27 first doses of Moderna, 5 second doses of Moderna, and 8 booster doses of Moderna. And separately at community corrections with the Douglas County Health Department, we administered 23 doses of Moderna. And as of August 1st, we have fully vaccinated 1,765 incarcerated individuals and provided 208 boosters to incarcerated individuals. Due to the CDC recently revising guidance, we are currently reassessing our COVID risk and response protocols. We are working with our medical director, Dr. Anthony Montague, and the Douglas County Health Director, Dr. Lindsay Hughes, to refine our processes. And finally, full deployment of our body-worn cameras is nearing completion. It will be done within the next couple of weeks. And our inmate tablet project, which I'll also bring before the board to demonstrate in a coming report, is also getting close to fruition. with a projected go live date sometime around or before October 15th. And with that, I am ready for your questions.
We have Commissioner Kavanaugh and Commissioner Friend. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thanks for this. Going back to where you started in terms of the census population being down, I note that I think the average daily population number that's quoted on page 2 is 1,073. Indication that's down 56. Is that month over month from?
You know what, Commissioner, that's a typo. That should have said an increase of 56.
Increase of 56.
Yes, my mistake.
Month over month?
Just from June, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I don't expect you to have this, off the top of your head, but a real good indicator for us would be year over year.
Yeah. What I can tell you, I can give you a reasonable. We have been trending anywhere 100 to over 200 people less on a year-to-year comparing to 22.
If you could, just send us that info.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it goes to what you were saying is, it's difficult to calibrate the impact of these programs that you've initiated, but something's affecting the population, and it's going in the right direction. So, if we could see that year-over-year figure, and August, it seems to me, if memory serves, is usually the high month of the year. So
it is like August and into early September, and then things start to typically gradually decrease after that. There is some graphs on page 35 and enclosure number 5 that will give you some of the trend data over the course of the last year.
That population history graph on page 35?
Yes, and even the one right above that might be a little clearer.
Average daily population?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it shows, kind of a downward trend, and that's a good thing. If, when you come before us next month, you'll have the August to August figures,
Right.
that'll give us kind of the high point to the high point,
Yep.
and that's great. The staffing, if I see correctly on page 7, I believe, indicates that our authorized staffing for the department is 494, and on hand we have 413, which is about 83%. But among CO1s, the frontline correction officer ones, I'm trying to find that, page 7, I believe.
Yep. 81.1%
Yeah.
of officers.
Okay. You got correction officers, CO1s, authorized 349, and we're only at 283 for 81%, which is kind of the, except for the management and support cohort and the inmate services associate, which are smaller, the lowest of the big cohorts of staff.
That's correct.
And that's where that 12 losses was impacted most in that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So those are people who most recently joined us and left, right?
Well, some of them may have been here. They're not necessarily, I guess I want to make sure I understand your question. They aren't necessarily the people who most recently joined us, but they are people who have left employment during the month of July. The length of time that they were with us will vary greatly.
Right. But the 12 that left, were they all CO1s?
They were all either CO1s or CO2s. That
Yeah.
we use that. We don't separate out CO1s and 2s for you on the report, but they were all either CO1s or CO2s.
And that's this category that's authorized at 349. but we
Correct,
only
that's
have
correct. That's a
283.
combined CO1 and CO2 total.
Right. So that's kind of concerning, and I know you're working hard on that. Just indicating that that possibly is something that we should maybe drill down on a little bit to see if we can do better. Finally, the majority-minority population that you indicated is over 65% remains extremely high.
30 seconds.
And
It does, and it's caused me, when I look at our numbers with pretrial in particular, 24/7 going up, I think it's given me pause to think about, do we need to take a look at, it's something we've never done, is the breakdown of people who are able to take advantage of the pretrial services. Even though there may not be any more, in an absolute sense, minorities in our jail, their percentage is going up, perhaps because of more people who aren't minorities might be getting out on pretrial.
Thank you.
Ton, thank you. Commissioner Friend and Commissioner Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mike, among other things that that I guess worry commissioners or worry people at the county level, and also ultimately citizens in the county, is we go to enclosure 4 and we go to personnel. It worries me greatly on a pretty consistent basis. One of the questions I wanted to ask, and I don't know if you and I have really ever gone ad nauseum about it. If you're behind and you put a group through an academy, the academy's taking X amount of time. When somebody leaves the academy, what does the OJT, what does the on-the-job training process look like, and how quickly can you get a CO1 up to the level? Because what I'm worried about, simply put, is when we're behind, how long is it going to take us to catch up?
Right.
Right.
So we've been here before, actually during my tenure. In 2019, we were down, I think, even a little bit more than what we are today. We worked with the union, as we just did now, to have them make an exception to how overtime is awarded, so that the academy class can work 10-hour days instead of 8-hour days, to accelerate the process. The difference between 2019 and now is, in 2019 we were able to attract classes where we were sitting a class between 20 and 25 people and had like 200 applicants to choose from to do so, and those numbers are now drastically depleted, and we are consistently now running classes, anywhere from, like, currently we started 9 yesterday, and we usually, historically have done at least double that. So in 2019, we were able to go from about 70 officers short, give or take, to fully staffed for a brief period of time in about 5 months using that accelerated academy. Right. I don't expect it to go that quickly this time.
So are you categorizing, and this is a little bit of semantics, but are you categorizing fully staffed when you have a certain amount of officers in an on-the-job training? I wouldn't even call it a probation period. They're working through things after the training academy.
We defined fully staffed when we hit our authorized number, so that could mean that there are some still in the academy. Right. In reality, they're not on the floors yet. And to maybe answer your other, we didn't directly ask this, but right now we've with the smaller numbers, and we can do a lot more one-on-one attention for the training purposes. That's one of the justifications we used for accelerating the academy. The academy is now 4 weeks of classroom kind of hands-on training, and then there's 2 weeks of field training after that, before they are working on their own. Okay. So it's a 6-week process right now.
Okay, we'll talk offline in more detail, and thanks for the information, Mike.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Morgan.
All right. Thank you so much for that presentation, Mike. Just a couple things. One thing is, whenever you present this, it always surprises me. On the last page, we talk about mental health acuity, and in this particular month, June of 2022, I should say, 291 out of about 1,000 inmates that are there have what's called a serious mental illness, like schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, or other types of psychosis. And that almost 44% of the population has been diagnosed with a mental illness. And I think it just stresses the importance of the fact you have something like the peer support groups, because that's tough to deal with anyway. Right. And I know that our mental health facility is trying to work with you to take care of those types of folks. Just kind of as an aside from that, you also put in there that 16% of the population is homeless or near homeless. If that's the case, first of all, are these folks that are belong in corrections for things they've done, or are they just homeless? And then afterwards, what's available to make sure that they can be discharged?
Well, they do have to be charged with a crime to join us, but you know, there's a lot of trespassings, refusing to leave. You know, those are, and they're typically in and out in a fairly short amount of time, and those are individuals who we might term familiar faces because we see them regularly. You know, we have a program called Familiar Faces, which oftentimes will target this group, and our reentry services staff are also working with the shelters and other service providers to try to connect individuals with services. One of the challenging things is that this group tends to have a quick turnaround, so sometimes it's difficult. Like they may get, by the time they do initial court appearance, they may be released with given 1 or 2 days of a sentence and time served. And so it's a tremendous challenge to be nimble enough to try and put something in place, you know, in that amount of time. We're currently interviewing we have a vacancy or 2 right now in reentry services, and one of those positions is a discharge triage position. And that's where we try to, once we know somebody's going to be released, we try to quickly arrange as many services as possible for them that they're willing to accept on their way out of the jail. And you know, we have had some success with that in the past in getting some people connected with some services, so we're anxious to get that position filled and going again.
All right, good, thanks.
Going to ask some of the same questions Commissioner Boyle mentioned. I know you said the homeless around 160, which would be 15% roughly. Are we working with the Open Door Mission and some others on that? And maybe at some point, you know, you may want to visit with some of us
Sure.
on the board to what we can do with ARPA monies or something else to work with them and those organizations a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner. We do engage with all of the homeless shelters and agencies like Community Alliance, who serve a very high overlap of those who are chronically mentally ill and also may likely be homeless or at least periodically homeless. We do everything we can to connect the people who with those community supports before they're released.
And then the other thing, if I'm looking at this correctly, about 80% of the people incarcerated have a mental illness. I mean, the monthly average is around the 831, June 893 for being diagnosed with mental illness.
And Commissioner, that's a cumulative total throughout the month. That may not, the pyramid actually on the next page shows the actual truer percentage. You know, so it's just 43.75% of a average daily population has a mental illness. Over the course of the month, of the individuals who we had in custody, who may not have been present on each day of the month, you get to that number of 893. So we typically, you know, we're looking at 400 plus individuals on a daily basis, but over the course of the month, it's closer to 900.
Which would still be 40%.
Yes.
And then the other thing, it's 3 or 4% with the serious
Correct.
mental illness. And are you working with different community services in that area besides just the county people, Sherry, and others?
Yes, I mean, the Community Mental Health Center is probably our biggest partner in terms of collaboration on kind of release planning and that continuum of care, but they are certainly not the only partner that we work with. Like I mentioned, Community Alliance. There's a lot of treatment centers that we refer people to, as well as, you know, more and more of the homeless shelters have developed a continuum of care within their own services. And
Okay.
so there's a lot of treatment programs that go on as a division, if you will, of maybe the Sienna Francis House that we make referrals to as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, let me ask you one last question. So, this 24/7 program, who makes the decision on who is admitted?
That is strictly a judicial decision. When individuals go before, typically almost 99% of the time it's done at their initial bond setting, and the judge will offer 24/7 as a condition, which might be used in conjunction with a lower amount of bond than what they might have had without that supervision, or they'll do it in lieu of bond altogether and just say, if you participate in this program, I'll release you without a cash bond.
So it's voluntary?
I'm sorry?
It's voluntary.
It's voluntary, yeah. The individuals do not, we can't force them to do it.
I'm just curious because the way I was told about most of these programs like that, the higher the success rate, the less risk. So what I'm saying is, it seems like all these are like in a 99. So I guess the judge is making a call that's out of their control, but it seems like there's some room for probably more people because it's like a 100% success rate.
So it's true. It is a very successful program. The drug testing is not as successful as the alcohol protocols, but we knew that when we started that to not to expect the same results. But I think that the new pretrial program will widen the net a little bit in terms of they can continue to use 24/7, but also have a variety of other services as well under the umbrella of pretrial supervision.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it? Think you're good?
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there a motion to adjourn the Board of Corrections meeting? Motion by Commissioner Morgan, second by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll now call to order the Douglas County Board of Commissioners meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson is absent. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Here. Commissioner Friend?
Here.
Commissioner Garcia? Here. Commissioner Morgan? Here. Mr. Chair.
Here. Item 1 is minutes and claims. Item A is approval of the minutes for the Tuesday, August 9th meeting. And item B is approval of claims submitted for payment and processed through Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. Is there a motion to approve? So moved. Motion by Commissioner Morgan. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
We'll go to item 2, which is consent agenda. Let me know from the start. Item N2 is being pulled because that item is completed.
Yes, Teresa York County Attorney's Office. It's my understanding that's already been signed by the purchasing agent for N2, so we don't want to have a duplicate agreement out there with a different start date.
Thank you. And item F, 3, and 4 should be pulled.
Laid over if we
Laid
make.
over, sorry, laid over because they're still working out contract negotiations.
3 and 4.
3 and 4, F, 3 and 4.
Yes.
Also, I need to pull F2 to vote on separately. So we'll vote on F2 separately, Mr. Clerk. Let me know when you've got that in there.
F2, F3, F4, and N?
N2.
N2, okay.
You want G off? Okay, Commissioner Boyle has requested G off. With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, which has 16 items with the removal of F2 to be voted on separately, G to be voted on separately, F3 and 4 are laid over, and F2 is completed. You got that, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, F2 through F4, G, and N2 are not included in this vote.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Excuse me.
Okay, wait, Larry, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
We have on here, and I believe Mark LaFour is online, an agreement between Douglas County Youth Center and Omaha Public Schools for Title I funding designated for services to aid students who are classified as homeless. And we just came off a discussion of homeless individuals in our correction center. And Mark, I was just wondering if you have any knowledge of what services we would provide pursuant to this agreement so people would know to homeless kids in the youth center.
Thanks for asking the question, Commissioner. The purpose is to assure that the homeless individuals are getting their education services while at the youth center. And it just assures that everyone that comes in is receiving a full complement of education.
So, do we have a significant number of homeless kids in the youth center? Can you tell?
That's not a stat that we currently keep, but that may be something worth checking into. But overall, most of the youth who arrive here at the youth center have a residence home of address. Occasionally, we find some who may have been on the run, but those individuals also are found with a residence home address. That for the homeless individuals, we see it's more with our migrant population that we see when homeless occasionally come into the facility.
Okay, so could you give us an example of what Omaha Public Schools Title I services are to this group of young people who are homeless, neglected, or delinquent?
Well, I can't speak exactly to the full stretch of the school district, but they reach out for anyone who has additional needs for Wi-Fi services, as well as additional materials, study materials, and also those individuals are also accessed for the individual education plan.
And is this an ongoing continuation of an ongoing agreement that we've had with OPS for some time?
Yes, this it's similar to the agreement that we've had over the past 13 years.
Thank you. I have one other question on another item. Item E is a resolution approving an agreement with Carson West Pavandra Architects for Douglas County Mental Health Facility Study. And we had Al Pavandra here recently to give us the initial study that they presented to us, and I believe this is for phase 2, as it indicates in the document of that, for $27,000. My question is, and Joe, maybe you can help us, is this an ARPA-funded initiative? Do you know?
My understanding was that this was going to be funded, actually under CARES Act, we put $7 million into the general fund reserve for mental health, and that's what we paid for the phase one of the study with. So if we're consistent, we'll pay phase 2 from that money.
From CARES, which was 2020, 2021.
2 that was put into the general fund reserve.
Okay. Thank you.
1 minute.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, then we have a motion to approve the agenda. You got a question on the consent agenda, Larry? Go ahead.
Thank you. Everybody's rules are different, but I thought that you're supposed to ask the audience attending if they have any comment on these consent agendas before you vote. Is that correct?
That's what we're doing now.
Okay. I'd like to point out in regards to items F 5 through 12 that at some point in time, all this grant money is probably going to disappear, and all of these agencies are going to have to go somewhere else for their money. What happens then? Will it be called meanies because we don't have it? Because we don't vote citizen dollars for it coming up next year? If you add all of these dollar figures here, they still come out of somebody's tax dollars somewhere, but that's a lot of money. And it's also probably duplicated at the city council level. It's already been somewhat funded by the United Nations and the refugee agencies with probably US tax dollars. And these grants are US tax dollars. But what happens when you can't get that tax dollar from the government? Are you prepared to tell these people you can't support them? And now we've got rental assistance being put into our laws, our codes, our ordinances. Isn't some of this stuff unconstitutional? You're not giving me money. You're not giving me a grant. So maybe consider before you vote on this that some of these programs maybe should be cut back on. Thank you.
Let me say for the record that the grants that are being proposed in those items are grants that flow through the state. They've been continual for years, but there's a clause in all grant-funded contracts that if money runs out, the program runs out. So that is understood. Seeing nothing else?
Commissioner, if I may, I apologize. Teresa, York County Attorney's Office. I just wanted for the clarity of the record that this vote does include the layover of F3 and 3 and
Yes.
4, and then you don't have to vote separately on that.
Yes, the only thing we're
Very
voting on
good.
separately are F2 and G.
Thank you.
Please vote.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
We'll now take F2. Is there a motion to approve F2? Motion by Commissioner Boyle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Friend. Please vote.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Motion passes. Commissioner Rogers abstaining. All other commissioners voting yes.
Item G, approval of a resolution to establish the 911 service surcharge in the amount of 50 cents per month in Douglas County as authorized by state statute. Commissioner Boyle.
I probably could have just had this pulled and discussed like Commissioner Kavanaugh did, but I was just curious what this is about. So Kathy, do you mind coming down? Is this, I read through the resolution, this is affecting just landlines, cell phone lines, and it's really to help fund basic services of 911, or what's?
Kathy Allen, 911 Director. What this is just a matter of a bit of paperwork. The state statute's already given the 50-cent max for wire line surcharge. It's been in place for years. There's also a requirement by state statute that the county board has to list that amount for the next calendar year prior to September 1st of the current year. So it's been this amount forever, and it's just a matter of following the state statute.
Okay, I think that was it. It's not a new surcharge. No. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. All right, thank you. So I make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve G by Commissioner Boyle. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Friend. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 5 is citizens' comments. This is an item, it's opportunity for citizens to comment on Board of Commissioner-related items that are not listed on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments?
Good morning. Thank you. Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. I had a pleasant experience a couple of weeks ago. I went to the Dodge County Board of Commissioners. And oh my goodness, they have way different rules than you folks do. Very pleasant back and forth discussion between them and us. Nobody called out of order. Nobody bummed giving the bums rush out for saying something slightly off. We had a long discussion and a presentation, but it wasn't presented as a presentation like your rules do. It was just like citizens' comments about, guess what, the election. Some facts that should be open to everybody's ears and thoughts in the coming days. This coming Saturday, there will be a presentation about the election and the software systems. That's what this one was about, and it's very informative. I had an opportunity to discuss with Brian Cruz briefly the other day and asked him to open his ears and his mind to the fact that maybe he's been deceived by people running the election systems. Maybe the Secretary of State's been deceived. Who knows? But who is deceiving them? It seems that there are some, nonprofits in the background on a national basis. And names like George Soros comes up that go out and pay people that need help, need money, are standing on the street corners, and they get paid to deliver ballots to affect the outcome of the election, maybe even registrations. Those things need to be discussed because the majority of the population now is rather upset about it. But our politicians don't want to discuss it, and we want to know why. Thank you.
Any other citizens' comments? Seeing none, we will move on to the committee reports and the Finance Committee. And item 1 is the budget report, and I take it that is as presented. Thank you. Item 2 is ARPA funding request to allocate $95,000 to Creighton University to cover the cost of feasibility study of converting 3 soon-to-be vacant buildings owned into affordable housing, child care, and other services. That's from my fund. There's no question out there. I'd ask for a motion to approve. Motion by Commissioner Boyle, is there a second? Second by Commissioner Garcia. You got questions on this? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a little trouble hearing today. Not usually. We're on Finance Committee, item 2, 3. Is that correct?
We're on 2.
Okay. Once again, I'd like to ask, what happens when ARPA funding is not available? I think the average citizen is rather confused as to why everybody is running for the money. The trough, which happens to be sort of like grants, but it's from the federal government. But unfortunately, I've paid into that fund over quite a few years. And I don't think that's the real intent of that money. To number one, Creighton University, if they own those buildings, why are we gonna give them $95,000? Let them spend their own money. And they have donors. Why raise my taxes for it? Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to the federal government. Why waste my money from the federal government for it? And then new business startups, excuse me? Can I come here and ask for a grant to start a new business? If so, I'm asking for that right today. Can I have $112,000 today? Perhaps you should debate that and amend it before you pass it. Thank you.
Point of record, you actually can go to the state and write a grant to start a new business if you want to. So you should do that, Larry. Anybody else? Please vote. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
On this grant to Creighton University of $95,000 for a feasibility study for converting 3 soon-to-be vacant buildings owned by Creighton. I'm looking at the backup documents here, and it says 3 soon-to-be vacated buildings owned by Creighton in North Omaha into affordable housing, childcare, and other community sources. And if I read this correctly, these are located at 29th and Birch Street, is that correct?
Right, it's the old dental school.
Oh, it is the dental school.
It's the dental school, it's the building to the west, which was the Chris building. And then the building attached to the dental school is the health science physical therapy building.
Okay. And the 95,000, it won't go towards converting these buildings, it's just for a study of what to do with these buildings?
It's a feasibility study for a bigger, to see if the project is viable.
Okay. I don't know that we've done anything, and I don't have any problem with this. I think, you know, converting those buildings to these kind of uses is probably a good thing. Would they still be under Creighton University ownership and control?
Yeah, but it may not be converting the building, it may be bringing the building down.
I'm sorry?
It may not be converting that building, it may be something totally different. The building could come down and start from scratch.
Okay. So the study is to convert the building and/or tear it down?
The heart of the study is to see what the feasibility of this project is in that area. And I don't know if it would recommend it come down or be remodeled. Likely, it would probably be come down.
Okay. And who's going to conduct the study?
That I don't know.
Um,
Somebody local, though, I know that.
Okay. We don't have any other documentation for this other than what's attached here, is that right?
Right.
Okay. Is there anybody from Creighton on the Zoom or here to discuss this at all?
No, not separately, but I can answer that question.
I'm sorry?
Not separately, but I could answer the question.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in this. I'm a Creighton alum, and I've spent time on the campus there. I'm familiar with these structures now that we know what they are, and I'm just interested in the process of what they're going to be doing with them.
From what I can say, if the feasibility study pans out, there'll probably be a request to another pot of ARPA money for a bigger project.
To complete the development of the properties?
If it pans out, because you need that to submit the show viability with a couple other studies.
Okay. Do we have any idea of the time frame that we're talking about here? Because, I mean, ARPA has a time limit on it, so is there any indication from Creighton of how long this feasibility study will take?
It'll be done within 3 months.
3 months?
Hopefully, yeah, that's what we're pushing for.
Okay. And this, I think we've all done this, is being funded from the ARPA set aside that you have,
Yes.
correct? Okay. We're not to number 3, but I have a couple questions on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Rogers abstains. Other commissioners voting yes.
Item 3 is ARPA funding approval resolution authorizing the award of $112,000 in ARPA funds to Lifestyle Fitness, Health, and Wellness to provide operational funding for a new business startup. Now, my understanding, Joe, is this Commissioner Borgeson's? Yes. Okay. And so is there a motion to approve item 3? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, is there a second? Second by Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Kavanaugh, she's not here, so I don't know what those questions may be.
I don't know if there's anybody from Lifestyle Fitness, Health, and Wellness here as well.
Is anybody online?
Joe, these kind of go across your desk. Is Lifestyle Fitness, Health, and Wellness a for-profit entity?
Yes, it's a small
And
business, right?
You've kind of reviewed this, and it's been to
Deloitte, yes.
Deloitte, right.
But it's approved as a small business that was adversely impacted by the pandemic, and so it qualifies it for ARPA funding.
And I'm, in favor of helping small business. Matter of fact, I've got a couple that I'm doing as well. But as far as this goes, this entity, Lifestyle Fitness, Health, and Wellness, is in existence. They have a business entity in existence now?
Yes, it started in like 2020, and so it started right as the pandemic was coming on board, and so they were rolled out their services, and as they did that, they were adversely impacted by the pandemic. But it is a business that's been in existence for a couple of years.
Okay. As far as this operational funding for this new business startup, a business that's been in existence is not a startup, so could you clarify for us how that?
Well, it was a startup during the pandemic, and that's when it's never really gotten its legs under it because it was a new business going through the pandemic, and so the owners started up with a reserve of cash that basically was eaten up quicker than they expected. And now, in order to keep the business as a going concern, they're requesting some ARPA funding to continue operations.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, this was started in 2020, is that right? Okay. And of course, they hit right into the teeth of
Right.
the pandemic. They had some difficulties, and this is stimulus money. You know, because we're going through this, and you'll be seeing this shortly with some locally owned restaurants, the impact is shown how exactly in this particular case?
I think it would be shown that their financial performance, their cash flow has been lower than the original business plan, and that was primarily due to the obstacles that they ran across by trying to get their business up and running during the pandemic. And so that ate up more cash than they were anticipating.
Okay. You know, and this kind of goes to, there's a phrase, I think, of showing the impact of ARPA or of COVID on your business to qualify for ARPA. This proof of impact was we had a business plan that projected some incomes. We did not reach those incomes, and so there's the impact. Is that?
That's the adverse impact, yes.
Okay. There wasn't an actual, because they started in 2020, prior years' gross revenues to compare.
No, and that's why there were some other programs out there, like through the state of Nebraska, but because they didn't have that prior history, they couldn't show a decrease in revenues. So that's why they didn't qualify for that program through the state, and why they came to the county to get this ARPA funding.
Okay, so we can fund people who were startups without their showing a prior year's income and then an impact income if they've got other proofs like a business plan where they're projected.
Yes, that's what Deloitte says, yes.
Okay.
1 minute.
And the business plan that they submitted to us had been drafted in that period of 1920 or whatever. It wasn't a subsequent business plan that they submitted.
No.
It was a business plan that they'd had originally.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle was, Commissioner Boyle and Commissioner Friend.
Yep. Yeah, thanks a lot. Just looking through the supplementary information that we have on this, it looks like this business is really into physical activity as a form of not only physical health but mental health. And this is an organization that's trying to have a lot of community events, physical events like bike rides and basketball camps and things like that too. So especially since we know how things like COVID and at-home learning has been detrimental to the health of kids, I think knowing that this type of organization is also vested in helping with that, I think is a good thing. So I think some of the statistics they also tell us is that Waterloo and Valley have a lower life expectancy than surrounding communities, as outlined by a UNMC study, and it has to do with rural obesity rates as well. So to know that there's something out there that will help meet that need, I think, is an important one. So just looking at the supportive information that we have, that's why I made a motion to approve.
Chair, I want to, I know a little bit, I know a little bit about everything, just ask me. I know a little bit about this, this facility, and I know enough to probably be dangerous. Let me give you a little, hopefully a short diatribe. A few years ago, way before the pandemic, this was where Mr. Bartholomew and Lifestyle Fitness actually exists and was renovated, was the old middle school, DC West Middle School. And there were some problems with that middle school. We, the Douglas County West School District essentially started some other infrastructure projects, moved the middle school, and this one actually had, there were some flooding issues, and there were mitigation issues that had to actually occur in that infrastructure, that building. So that's a little bit of history, infrastructure-wise, about what's going on out there and what this place looks like. Second key aspect to this, so that's pretty important. We're talking about something in Waterloo, and anybody that's been out to Waterloo knows that there is growth, but it's selective growth. It's in certain areas, and it's development-based. But that certain area of Waterloo, I would say, I wouldn't use the term substandard and blighted. It's not. But there are issues in regard to development, future development. So that's one thing. Second thing, real quick, is what life's, they're in Valley, at Westview High School, where close to where I live. In a lot of different areas of this community, we have YMCAs and we have all kinds of things popping up that are providing, to Commissioner Boyle's point, the type of wellness and type of exercise and type of social interaction, and the Waterloo, for lack of a better term, doesn't have any of that. And I think what Lifestyle is actually providing, and if you go through some of the paperwork, which I did last week, that Mr. Bartholomew provided, there's a void, and they're filling it. And I don't know if it's worth $112 million, but it's worth something, and I think that they're going to be able to really do some pretty neat things. So I'm an advocate. And by the way, here's the final point. We've been talking about this stuff for 2 years. We had CARES money that came in before I got onto this board, and we were spending it because the feds told us we could. And now at one point, we had $110 million that we could spend because the feds told us we could. And the trouble with this is, and this sounds a little bit like grandstanding, the trouble with this is you give somebody carte blanche, and short of what Deloitte is doing and short of what a lot of folks are doing and keeping an eye on all this stuff, it is carte blanche. They essentially tell you, you got to spend it or it's gone. And the problem I have with this whole thing for the last 2.5 years is the federal government spending like drunken sailors and then telling us we have to spend like drunken sailors. We don't have any choice. We got to get rid of the money. You wonder why our economy's messed up right now? You want me to go off on a tangent? How much time do I have? You want to know why our economy's messed up right now at 8.25% inflation rates? It's because we have inundated this economy with so much cash that we don't have to verify, that we don't have to produce anything. There's no gross domestic product associated with it. Now we're worried about a guy who's actually developing, well, I don't know if we're worried about it. Jim was just asking questions, and Maureen was too. But we're a little bit concerned about a guy who's actually trying to develop something, or any other business in Omaha, trying to develop something that's going to help people. Folks, I've seen it. I know there's value. But I'm not sure there's any value to any of this COVID money that we've received, because the end result is going to be something that we're going to be dealing with 5 years from now, 6 years from now, 10 years from now, and let's let our kids handle it. That's the end of my rant. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
I think that the point that I am interested in here is that we're finally giving some relief to local for-profit businesses. The first that we did in that category was a project in Ralston that I proposed that was ARPA funded recently to help a Main Street development there. And we've got one coming that will help small, locally owned restaurants in our community. I think this is long overdue, and we should do more of it. So I'm, in favor of these types of things. The question that I was asking Joe about goes to the attestation part of the COVID impact, which is kind of a key thing. If you have a business, you should show that COVID impacted your business in order to qualify for the ARPA funding. And as Joe indicated, in this case, there wasn't a book of business for the previous pre-COVID year of basically 2019 to compare to the COVID year of 2020, or you could compare 2020 to 2021 to show that impact. That's called attestation, and means, here, I'm showing you that there was an actual impact. In this case, it's based on a business plan. I think in the small business restaurant grant program, they're going to be actually showing an impact from one year's book of business to the next year's book of business, which is, pretty definitive in terms of COVID impacted my business. This is good stuff, and I encourage my colleagues to support it, and I would also encourage them to look at the one that we're going to do for the small, locally owned restaurants, which should be expanded, if possible, in the ARPA funding that we've got coming on, to kind of replicate what Lincoln Lancaster County did. I think our restaurant grant program is coming in at about $700,000. Lincoln Lancaster did a similar program for $7 million. And in light of the fact that we've spent tens of millions of dollars of ARPA funds already, and CARES before that, without much, if any, other than the ones we're talking about going to the for-profit community, I think it calls for us to help the people who provide services and jobs and pay taxes in this community and have been impacted by COVID to get some relief from these funds. It's primarily gone to government entities and not-for-profits up till now, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying it's time that we address the needs of our small business for-profit community as well, and not just limited in this case to fitness services, or in the case of the Ralston program to Main Street development, or to just restaurants in the upcoming Restaurant Grant Act, but expand it into other impacted areas, because there are clearly a lot of small businesses that were providing human services. I just use anybody that was in the personal care business, say hair care or massage care or anything like that, were pretty much prevented from doing business for a period of the COVID pandemic because of the constraints of the pandemic. And so we should look at those, as well as the hospitality industry and the beverage industry in our community, to see if we can do what Lincoln did and maybe expand this going forward in the COVID thing. In the meantime, I would, support this and the
1 minute.
Grant program that we're going to have coming up shortly for restaurants in our community. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, there is a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item D is Community Service Committee. We're going to take 1 and 2 together. They are tied because we had an action last week. This number 1 just is a resolution that sets the public hearing date for September 13th of 2022 to consider the golf course ordinance, and 2, the board directs the county attorney and the administration to draft a proposed ordinance to be considered at that public hearing for the golf cart operation at SID 559 Indian Point and SID 580 Indian Point 2 in Douglas County. Is there a motion to approve A1 and 2?
Teresa, your county attorney's office, I apologize for interrupting. We wanted to, for D1, which is the county ordinance that's further on in the process. We did want to make a correction to that ordinance, and it's just changing one of the statute numbers. So if I may, I would ask the board to also include direction to the county attorney's office to provide that to the county clerk after this meeting. Or I can do it by interlineation right now as we sit here.
Is
Either
there a
way,
motion?
fine.
Oh, go ahead.
That's all I have.
Is there a motion to approve 1 and 2 with the recommended changes from legal counsel to 1? Motion by Commissioner Morgan, second by Commissioner Boyle. Seeing no questions, roll call.
Give me one moment, please. And Commissioner, could you repeat the motion and second on that one, please?
Commissioner Morgan first, Commissioner Boyle second.
Okay. All right, thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
We'll go to G, which is the Human Resource Committee. Item 1, the weekly personnel report and civil services is as submitted. Item 2, there are no legislative issues this week. And we do have a need for an executive session for personnel, labor, and litigation.
So we have labor negotiations, we have contract negotiations. So we're talking about a contract involving landfill and 911 contract, not union negotiations, but just contract negotiations.
So there's no labor, it's contract.
So there's labor as well.
Okay. So
And then
again,
is there security? You have something for security as well?
Yes, Teresa, York County Attorney's Office. I have down for topics, personnel, security, labor negotiations, contract negotiations, legal advice, and litigation. So,
then those will be noted by the clerk. Is there a motion to go into executive session for those matters? It's motion by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Motion passes 6-0.
Recording stop.
Motion to reconvene and adjourn by Commissioner Morgan, second by Commissioner Rogers. The motion passes 4-0. We're adjourned at 12:22 p.m.